We ask, dear Lord, that you bless Governor Ron DeSantis as he works long hours leading his great state of Florida with dedication and courage. Keep him healthy and motivated. Thank you, dear God, for our friends and families. Bless them individually and collectively. Bless our troops and their families. Keep our elected officials strong and brave. Help them as they fulfill their sworn assignments. All this we ask in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Reverend. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, let me acknowledge some people who have joined us tonight. Former Congressman, forever our Congressman, Peter King. Peter? Come on, Peter King, Nassau County. Senator Alphonse D'Amato. Conservative State Chairman Jerry Kassar. And two men who are doing a great job in Washington, Congressman Anthony D'Esposito and Nick LaLota. So after a few years of having a Democrat lead Nassau County, the people came out in 2021. Early on in the year, on or about February the 11th, they said this guy didn't have a chance. He was down over 25 points in polls, but he came on, he worked as hard as anyone could, and he's proven over the past 15 or so months that he's doing a great job. Our county executive, Bruce Blakeman. Bruce Blakeman!
Thank you very much. Wow, what a crowd. What a crowd, thank you. Well, we're all here to welcome Governor DeSantis to Nassau County, and I know that I'm going to read his book very carefully, but I will tell you this. Here in Nassau County, we have almost 1.5 million people. We're larger than 10 states. Our gross domestic product is larger than 145 nations in the United Nations, and we've just been voted the healthiest county in the United States. You know why? You know why? Because we stole a page out of his book before he wrote it. Low taxes, safe communities, support our police, respect for our military, patriotism, religious freedom. So, I want you to do me one favor tonight. I want, and I know Chairman Cairo feels the same way, Anthony D'Esposito, Nick LaLota, Joe Saladino, our great team, all of us who are here tonight as elected officials, we just want one favor. We want you to give him such an applause, such a reception, that they hear him in Tallahassee and they hear us. God bless you all. God bless the United States of America. And God bless Governor DeSantis.
Bruce Blakeman, our county executive. This next man did a great job. A great job in Congress, an even greater job last year as our candidate for governor. He came this close, but this close doesn't count. Wait until next time. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Zeldin.
What an amazing turnout on a Saturday night. Listen, we're all New Yorkers who are here. We care about our state. We see it heading in the wrong direction. In 2018, Florida was at a crossroads. Florida could have went one direction, but they chose a path that's brought it a sense of prosperity that New Yorkers and others across the country are quite jealous of. See, New York leads the entire country in out-migration. Florida is seeing people coming in droves. Why is that? See, we have leaders in government right now in this state up in Albany. New York leads the nation in out-migration because how are you going to ever fix any of these problems if you have people in charge who won't even confront why it is that we have so many people leaving for Florida and Texas and Tennessee and the Carolinas? Well, people look at a state like Florida, they know that their money is going to go further. As we were going through years of COVID, people knew that they would be able to live life freer. People are feeling like this government in Albany is making us less safe. They're not seeing our law enforcement support it. They feel like they haven't passed enough pro-criminal laws. And unfortunately, right now, we have DAs who are refusing to do their jobs in so many respects. But you could go to the free state of Florida and know that you have a government there that respects individual liberty and freedom, that believes that the hard-earned money in your wallet should be yours to decide how to spend it best, that the quality of our kids' education is one that can be improved not by just trying to throw more money at education, but by understanding that parents have a right to control the upbringing of their child and to send their kids to whatever school they want to because they're in charge of their son and daughter's education. You know, there were some national test scores that came out a few months ago. New York spends 2.5 times as much per pupil than Florida does. And you look at 4th grade math and English, and the black students, Hispanic students, low-income students, across the board are outperforming our 4th grade black students and Hispanic students and low-income students. So it's not just about spending money. It's about having good government. It's about respecting freedom and welcoming with open arms people of all walks of life. Last summer, Kathy Hochul was at a rally, and she said that I should get on a bus and move down to Florida because I was challenging her, because I disagreed with her. Well, Florida has a governor right now. If you think about it, across all 50 states, and there are some great Republican governors across America, but the greatest one in America is here with us tonight. I served with this man in the House of Representatives. We were on the House Foreign Affairs Committee together. We were fighting hard to make sure that our military was prepared, our veterans were taken care of when they came home, that we were treating friends like friends and adversaries as adversaries. See, when I got there in 2015, the Obama administration was treating Israel like Iran and Iran like Israel. They were trying to get an Iran nuclear deal through. And John Kerry would come before our committee, and Congressman Ron DeSantis would be grilling him and the others to make sure that America was getting the best deal for America, that there truly was accountability, that your voice was being communicated not just through your congressman, but through others who get it. And fortunately for us as New Yorkers, as proud Americans, people who believe that we live in the greatest country in the history of the world, as proud Americans who love our military and our law enforcement, we love this flag and our liberty. We had a congressman in Florida who was fighting for us, and I'm proud to call him a friend, and I'm honored that he's here. And right before I bring him up, I want to give a shout out to Allison Esposito, who I see. She was my running mate in last year's campaign. To Chairman Jerry Kassar and our hosts here, great crowd, Chairman Joe Cairo and the County Executive Bruce Blakeman, and so many others who are doing so much here as Long Islanders. We are not leaving. This is a state that we are going to stay and fight for to save this state and save our country. But before we're able to do that in the future, the time is right now to do everything in our power, all in defense of this flag. And we need to come together as proud Americans with a common voice and a common purpose. And I think that it is so important and a great honor, a great privilege for all of us tonight here on this Saturday night to give a warm Long Island welcome to the great governor from the state of Florida, my friend Ron DeSantis. Hello, Long Island. I bring greetings from the free state of Florida. Do I have any Florida residents in the house? Couple. Do I have any Florida property owners in the house? Probably a little bit more. Do I have any future Florida residents in the house? Although, Lee, I think I think he did great, and I knew that if he could have gotten in, that would have slowed down the migration. There's no question about it. I think Nassau County getting the good election results probably slows down the migration as well. But we appreciate everybody that's coming down to visit, to live, or whatnot. It's really makes our state better. Also, this is a phenomenal place. I didn't know this was here, this museum. I look to see the Blue Angels as a Navy veteran. That warms my heart. They're headquartered in Pensacola, in Florida. And I just know the Navy would never have been dumb enough to ever entrust me with one of those, and so that's probably the way it should be. But we're excited to be here. The book, I think some of you got this. This hit #1 in America. Can you believe that? It's a lot of people that were not happy about that, I'll tell you what. But I think it's a good story about what's happened in Florida, because I got elected in 2018 by 32,000 votes, half a percentage points out of over 8 million votes cast. And Florida, for the 10 years before that, had been a 1-point state. Governor's races, president races, they decide either side by 1 point, 2010, 12, 14, 16, 18. And I was told, you got in, it's closely divided, trim your sails, don't rock the boat, just understand the state's got a very delicate political balance, and you just got to be very careful, and you got to tread very carefully when you get in there, especially given the narrow margin. I rejected that advice. My view was I may have received 50% of the vote, but that entitled me to wield 100% of the executive authority, and I intended to use it, and I intended to move the ball forward. And we would do that, I resolved early on, by not resorting to looking at polls. A leader shouldn't be captive by polls. A leader should set out a vision, execute that vision, and then deliver results for people, and then guess what happens? If you do that successfully, the polls will change in your direction anyways. And so get out in front of public opinion. Don't be captive to what some of these polls may do. The other thing we did was say, you know what, I can make great decisions as governor. I could have great policies. But if I don't have a team of people around me that share the vision and that want to see the policies executed, then it's not going to amount to very much. And so we made it very clear people serving in our administration had to put the mission first. If they had any other agenda other than the best interests of the state of Florida, they were told to pack their bags and not to let the door hit them on the way out. And so for over 4 years, we don't have leaks, we don't have palace intrigue, we just methodically execute the agenda that the people put us in office to execute, and we've done that with great success. And finally, I said, you have a lot of these Republicans, they'll get into office, and they're so gun-shy.
about leading because they don't want the media to attack them or they don't want the left to attack them. And we said, that's not what we're doing. We're going on offense. We're going to make sure that we are out there every day delivering victories. So fast forward 4 years later, November 2022, and whereas we had won by 32,000 votes and half a percentage point in 18, we were able to win by over 1.5 million votes and almost 20 percentage points in 2022. The New Yorkers used to tell me when they would move to Florida, at least the Republicans, they'd give me a hug and they'd say, I'm so glad my vote finally counts coming to Florida because we had been a one-point state. Now you look at it, I could have probably, if all the New Yorkers who moved here could have voted for Lee, that may have been the difference. He may have been able to do it. So we've got a little margin to play with now in Florida, but what we were able to do is not just win big, we were able to win places Republicans hadn't been able to win before. We won Miami-Dade County, our most populous county, by double digits. We won Palm Beach County. Can you believe that? Most of you know that's not something that was ever supposed to go red. We were able to win independents by 18 percentage points, and we were able to win women by 8 percentage points, which most Republicans have not been able to do. But it wasn't just about me. I mean, yes, I was leading the ticket. We were making sure that we were able to kind of set the tone, but we worked hard to help candidates up and down the ballot. So we were able to win with super majorities in our Florida legislature now, the biggest majorities we've ever had. We were able to elect school board members, conservative school board members, all throughout the state of Florida, and they're making a difference. We have in Florida today, after the 2022 election, we have the first time since the Civil War period where there's not a single Democrat elected to statewide office in our entire state. You've seen it, not just one election, but what we've done is we've really had a fundamental shift in our electorate. When I got elected governor, we had almost 300,000 more registered Democrats in Florida than Republicans, and we had never, in the history of the state, had more registered Republicans than registered Democrats. Well, fast forward 4.5 years later, we now have almost 450,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. Can you believe that? And so those are the types of elections that take a state from being a swing state and making it a red state. And I can tell you the reason that we were able to do that is because we just beat the left, and we beat the Democrats across the board, and the Democratic Party in the state of Florida is dead, dead, dead right now. But I think, well, you know, the book, I think what we talk about, kind of the lesson of this, and I think it's instructive for other states and across the country, is that bold leadership is rewarded. We were doing things that the chattering class said we shouldn't do. We were leading on conviction, not based on polls. And President Reagan was right. The way to garner big support is to govern in bold colors, not with pale pastels. So we did that. And not only did folks in Florida who had usually voted the other way voted for us, we, of course, helped spark a major migration to our state, the likes of which we have never seen. And I don't need to tell you about it in New York, because you've seen it in New York, in Illinois, in California. States governed by leftist politicians imposing leftist ideology have driven good, productive people out of their jurisdiction. And Florida, the free state of Florida, was really the promised land for many, many people over these last 3 or 4 years. We lead the country in net in-migration. We are the fastest growing state in the country. We lead the nation in new business formations. We're number one amongst large states in GDP growth. We're number one in education freedom, number one for parental involvement in education. we have no state income tax. You all should try it sometime. I'm telling you, it works. Respect the taxpayer. They respond very positively. In fact, if you look at our per capita state tax burden, number 2 lowest in the country, and then if you look at our per capita state debt burden, number 2 lowest in the country, Florida's economy is over $1 trillion, and our debt is $20 billion. Compare that to the federal government, where the national debt far exceeds the overall size of the American economy. So we're doing it right, and I think Lee mentioned it, some of the other speakers talk about how even though we now have millions of more people in Florida than New York does, New York's budget is twice the size of the budget of the state of Florida. But is that leading to better services or education outcomes, right? No, it's not. They're not respecting the taxpayer. They're taxing you, and they're not producing results with it. Of course people want to go to greener pastures, and you're doing it. How do we manage the money? Yes, we spend much more conservatively, but we take care of big items. Our infrastructure is strong. We're number 3 and 4 in the country, respectively, 4th grade reading, 4th grade math, and we just did the largest expansion of school choice in American history. So we're taking care of the people. And we're taking care of them in ways that is sustainable for the long term. Our budget last year was, I think, $109 billion, but that yielded a budget surplus of almost $23 billion, the largest in the history of the state of Florida. I make sure to ensure discipline fiscally because I have a line item veto as a governor. And so I vetoed $3.3 billion out of the budget, about 3% of the total budget we vetoed to make sure that we were standing up for taxpayers. So not only do we not have income tax, not only do we have the second lowest per capita tax burden in the country, the way we're managed, people can have confidence that there's not going to be a need to ever have an income tax in Florida or do any of that stuff. You know the state is built for the long haul, and we're really proud of that. One of the things that really sparked people coming, and I know many of you were able to see this, was that when COVID hit, all the states and localities had to make a decision about how they were going to handle that. And I'm just proud that when the world seemed to lose its mind, when common sense suddenly became an uncommon virtue, that the state of Florida stood as a refuge of sanity, a citadel of freedom for people to come, enjoy the life, and make their best decision. We were not going to let the state of Florida descend into some type of Faucian dystopia where people's livelihoods were destroyed. And we were pilloried for taking the stands that we took, particularly early on. But my view is I had a lot of supporters being like, man, you need to do something because all these other people are doing this, you're doing that, this is going to be really bad for you politically and all this other stuff. And maybe so, I didn't know, but my job as a leader is to put the interests of the people I represent and their jobs over my own job. And I can't just sit there and try to protect my political hide, which I think a lot of politicians were doing. No, I've got to make the tough decisions knowing that that was right for the people I represented. So I didn't know I was going to work out politically, but my view is let the chips fall where they may. And if it doesn't work out for me politically, I'll be able to look in that mirror and know I did the right thing. And we're better off for having done that. But now we can look back. And as much hysteria was going on then, as much as people like me were attacked and some of the other governors that took strong stands were attacked, we can say that the elites, like Fauci, got almost everything wrong. He was wrong. They were wrong about lockdowns. They were wrong about forced masking. They were wrong about denying natural immunity. They were wrong about the need to have schools open. They were wrong about the lab leak, that this came from the lab and not from a wet market. They used to say you were a conspiracy theorist if you said it came from the lab. And it caused a lot of problems in our society, and I think a lot of the real strong lockdown jurisdictions have still not recovered from this with their economy. I don't think the BLM riots would have been as bad as they were if people weren't coming out of lockdown like they had been. I think it's caused huge problem with our money supply in terms of the Fed pumping all this money and leading to the inflation. And my question is, these were some of the worst decisions that were made. Where is the accountability for people like Fauci who were involved with this? But here's what I figured out pretty early, is that a lot of the stuff that was done was not done to protect your health. It was done because people wanted to control your behavior. And it was about exercising control. And so we took really strong action before other states. For example, we banned COVID shot mandates for school children in the state of Florida. We banned the use of vaccine passports in the state of Florida. You can go out to dinner, you don't got to show medical papers. And when both corporate America and the federal government were trying to deny people the ability to even put food on the table based on whether they took a COVID shot or not, I called a special session of the Florida legislature. We enacted legal protections for employees in Florida so that no Floridian had to choose between a job they needed and a shot they didn't want to take. It's your choice to do that. And I know we're now a few years removed from the onset of this, and so there's a tendency to act like, well, you know, that's kind of the past. But just understand, they're still clinging to some of this stuff. We were not allowed, they would not allow Djokovic, the great tennis player, to fly to the United States and participate in the Miami Open because he didn't take a COVID shot, and he has to show proof of having taken a COVID shot. How ridiculous is that? That we're here 3 years later, he's already had COVID, and they want to bar him. So I wrote Biden a letter. I said, you should repeal the policy. It's not based on science. It's based on politics. But I noticed it wasn't entirely clear in your order whether it applied to people coming in by boat. So I let Djokovic know, we'll bring you in from the Bahamas if you want to come. I'll get a boat over there. They're also in federal court now. So we had a case in Florida with a great district judge in Tampa, and she ruled that the airline mask mandate was unconstitutional. And so that's how that mandate went away. They didn't do it voluntarily. Well, now Biden's administration is in federal court on appeal arguing to have that judge's ruling overturned so they can reimpose an airline mask mandate. Are you kidding me? So the lesson is, if they can find a way to do some of this again, they're going to do it. And so we've got to be on guard. So in the state of Florida, our legislature's in session now, and we are going to be, and we've done a lot of protections for people, but we're enacting a comprehensive medical freedom bill to expand and make permanent our protections against forced medical interventions like masks and like mRNA shots. You can make those decisions for yourself. Another reason when I would talk to people about the folks that would move from Florida is they saw Florida correctly as being a law and order state. We were not going to tolerate the rioting that occurred with the BLM riots that started in Minneapolis and, of course, spread to New York City and other places. In fact, when we saw that going on in other states, we mobilized our National Guard in Florida. We had state law enforcement ready. Not on our watch. We were not going to let it happen. We wanted to make sure that people were safe. We also understood that this probably wasn't the last time something like this could happen, so we enacted legislation to make sure that we had stiff penalties for people that were rioting or engaging in mob violence. You know, in places like Portland, people will go and they'll riot, they'll get arrested, they get their mugshot taken, slapped on the wrist, put right back on the street to do it all over again. Not in Florida. If you riot, if you loot, if you engage in mob violence, you're not getting a slap on the wrist, you're getting the inside of a jail cell. We're holding you accountable. We also rejected the idea that the police should be defunded. How ridiculous was that they were doing? And so we signed legislation to prohibit local government in Florida from defunding police. If they do it, we at the state will put the money back in. You know, you can have any city commission could have 3 yahoos elected that are on some ideological joyride and do stupid things. When you talk about defunding the police, you're playing with the safety and security of the public, and we're not going to let that happen. So we'll stand up for what's right. And not only that, so no defund, but we saw some of these police officers were treated around the country, treated horribly. So what we did, we enacted a program to say, you know, if you're at one of those agencies and you're qualified to come take a job in Florida at a city, county, state, law enforcement, you get a $5,000 signing bonus right off the top because we appreciate the job you do to protect our public and keep us safe. And people are coming. I got a lot from New York City have come, I'll tell you that. We also reject soft-on-crime policies like you have in New York with the elimination of cash bail. We also reject jailbreak legislation that releases criminals early who have not been rehabilitated and may represent a danger to society. So those policies in Florida are dead on arrival. And I think you've also seen here in New York and other places around the country, and I know Lee Zeldin made this a big issue, and rightfully so. We've got a problem with progressive prosecutors getting elected in some of these big cities, oftentimes funded by people like George Soros, and they get elected not to enforce the law in an even-handed way. They get elected to use the prosecutor's office to advance a political agenda, to advance an ideological agenda. So you'll have prosecutors like in Philadelphia or in San Francisco. They'll say, you know, we're not going to prosecute crimes that we don't think should be crimes. You go, you get mugged in Los Angeles, and a lot of times they won't even prosecute the guy who's doing it. They put people right back on the street, crime goes up, the community safety goes down. And so these folks are not doing what a prosecutor should do. You don't like a law as a prosecutor? The appropriate course of action is to resign your position, run for the legislature, and try to change the law. You don't have a right to be a law unto yourself. And I think one of the things that Lee Zeldin promised to do, and he would have done, was remove the district attorney from Manhattan from his position. This guy is all about politics. He comes in, his whole thing is he doesn't want people to be in jail. He wants to downgrade felonies to misdemeanors. Really, really dangerous stuff. And then what does he do? He turns around, does a flimsy indictment against a former president of the United States based on a bunch of things that they're saying business records, which, first of all, even if it's true, that's a misdemeanor. And they're trying to do all these legal gymnastics to try to act like it's a felony, when almost every other time he's trying to take the felonies and downgrade them to misdemeanors. This guy is doing politics. He has an agenda. That is not the rule of law. Now, we had a guy... We had a fella in Tampa, where I'm from, that got elected, same platform, and he said there were certain laws that he was going to refuse to enforce, and I don't believe prosecutors are laws unto themselves, so I removed him from his post. We're the only governor in the country to remove a Soros-backed DA. But these prosecutors are menace to society. Because when they're not enforcing the law in an even-handed way, they're letting so many real criminals go, that impacts ordinary people and makes their communities much less safe. So I think we need to see people elected to prosecutors' office who actually believe in the rule of law and are actually going to put your interests ahead of their own political, ideological interests. And we'll make sure that happens in Florida, I can tell you that. To me, law and order means that you have law and order at your country's borders, particularly at our southern border. We have seen We have seen massive amounts of fentanyl pouring into our country. Tens of thousands of Americans died because of fentanyl overdose last year. The number's gone through the roof just over the last few years. You have criminal aliens coming across the border. You have people that are on the terror watch list coming across the border. You even had people from China coming across the border. What is going on down there? And I can tell you this, every state is a border state, because what's happening at that affects your communities in New York with the drugs. You will get criminal aliens that come here. We have some that try to come to the state of Florida. So we have leaned in on illegal immigration in the state of Florida. We ban sanctuary cities in our state. We sued Biden over his catch and release policies, and we actually won with the federal judge in the Florida Panhandle, and so his catch and release has been ruled to be illegal. He's trying to appeal it, but we're right on the law, and we're going to hold him accountable there. We also in Florida, even though we're not on the southern border, we have a major maritime border, of course, with our whole state. So they'll run boats from Haiti, from Cuba, with illegal aliens, and the Coast Guard is in charge of dealing with it, and they actually do a really good job, but they don't have enough resources. And so you had boats coming through, landing in the Florida Keys, 10 aliens, 100 aliens. The Coast Guard one time dumped 300 aliens, so I said, wait a minute, we can't have this. So we mobilized all our maritime resources, declared a state of emergency. We are now interdicting along with the Coast Guard, and since August, we've been able to repatriate 11,000 illegal aliens back to Haiti and back to Cuba. What frustrates me is you see a lot of the damage that's happening with these open border policies, and yet a lot of people don't want to talk about it. I know a lot of the legacy media has never wanted to talk about it. The only time they got interested in it was when we had 50 show up in beautiful Martha's Vineyard. Then they got really upset at that. They said they were a sanctuary jurisdiction, but then the border towns are expected to have thousands of people come through. These are very poor towns, but you have this really rich enclave, and somehow they called out the National Guard and they deported these people the next day. Not much of a sanctuary jurisdiction. We need a secure border, but if your policies are open borders, then they should go to sanctuary cities and jurisdictions. They should not come to places like Florida that are not sanctuary states, and so that's what we're doing. But I will make this offer to Joe Biden because I believe that we need the construction of a border wall along the southern border. I think that would do wonders to stop the flow. And what I can offer is this. We had a major hurricane come through southwest Florida at the end of September, Hurricane Ian, one of the strongest ones that's ever hit Florida, and it actually knocked out the major bridge going to Pine Island, and it severed the Sanibel Causeway in 3 different areas going to Sanibel. And the residents in those areas were told, you're going to be out of luck for 6 months. And that would have basically ruined those islands because you got to have the ground traffic. I mean, we were helicoptering in and stuff the day after or whatever, but you would not have been able to do what you needed. And they weren't state bridges, they weren't state roads, but they came to me and said, Governor, can you help us? We're going to be dying out here if we have to wait 6 months. I was like, all right, I'll help. So I got my guys together and I said, listen, I don't want to hear about red tape. I don't want to hear about bureaucracy. I don't want to hear I can't do this. We need to get these things built. And so we took over the job, and they said it was going to take 6 months, and we restored Pine Island Bridge in 3 days. So I only raised that because I'm willing to send my guys to Florida down to the southern border to build the wall. Just let me know, Joe. I'll do it. We're at your service. Of all the things that we've done, one of the things that I'm most proud of is that we've put a really strong emphasis on education, particularly the idea that the purpose of our schools should be to provide that solid foundation, a classical education, not serve as a way to impose political indoctrination on the students. And we believe that parents have a fundamental role in the education and upbringing of their kids. We've enacted a Parents' Bill of Rights in the state of Florida that provides those protections. And the thing is, the K through 12 school system, it's important. Charter schools are important, private schools, they're all important. They're important parts of our community, but they do not supersede the rights of parents. They are supposed to be there supporting the objectives of the community of the state. These are taxpayer-funded systems, the K through 12 system and our higher education system in terms of public universities, and we have every right to insist that they are fulfilling the mission that's in the public interest. It's not in the public interest to have these be indoctrination factories or to have them focus on political activism. It's in the public interest to promote things like rigorous academics, the search for truth, and giving students a foundation so they can think for themselves and be citizens of our republic. So part of what empowering parents means is to make sure that every parent has the wherewithal to be able to send their child to a top-performing school. So we in Florida have enacted universal school choice for every parent in the state of Florida. You have a right now to have an education savings account, and you can send your child to private school. You have options for charter school, and you even have school choice options within each individual school district. We already have over 1.3 million students in choice programs, and with the legislation we signed last week, we're likely to have many, many more. So we're proud of that, and we're leading the way on school choice. We've also led the way on rejecting things like critical race theory in our K through 12 schools. We're not going to teach our kids to hate our country or to hate each other. We're going to treat kids as individuals. We're going to teach them that it's what their character and their talent and their hard work take them, not try to siphon them off into individual groups. We also are ensuring that parents have the right to know what curriculum is being taught in their child's school. And you hear these things because some parents in Florida have objected to some of the books because unfortunately, you have some books for very young kids even, that have pornographic images in them. And that's just not appropriate, especially with tax dollars to be doing. It's not age appropriate. And some in the media say, Florida, they want to ban books, they don't want all this stuff. And first of all, no, it's what choices are you making when you're curating books, when you're having books in a classroom or library or with a course, and parents have every right to ensure that those books are age appropriate. They have every right to ensure that those books are consistent with Florida standards. I exposed this in a press event we did a few weeks back. We called it Exposing the Book Ban Hoax, because it is a hoax. So we started the press conference with a video that just showed the images and showed some of the books and stuff that the parents were objecting to. The news stations had to cut their feeds because they said it was too explicit. Well, if it's too explicit for the 6 o'clock news, how's it okay for a fourth grader? I mean, give me a break. And as important it is to say that you don't want CRT, you don't want the age-inappropriate material, and you need to say that, but you also need to say, what do you want education to be? And part of what we in Florida want education to be is we want to prepare everyone that comes through our school system to understand what it means to be an American and to be capable of discharging the duties that come with being an American citizen. So we've put a renewed emphasis on teaching civics in our schools, particularly in our high schools. And we've even signed legislation identifying November 7th of every year as a date where all school children in Florida will receive instruction about the evils of communism and communist regimes throughout history. We're going to tell the truth about Marxism and Leninism. We also have been proud to stand up and make it very clear that, it's inappropriate for someone working in a school, a teacher, administrator, to tell a student that they may have been born in the wrong body or that they can change their gender. That is wrong. And so we made sure that that's something that parents can have confidence they send their kids to school. That is not going to be happening in Florida. We need to be focusing on math and science and reading and all the important things. I mean, we're proud of what we've done in Florida. We got a lot more to do. You guys have a lot more to do here. So let's get the basics right. We also had to do a bill, and I'm happy to sign this legislation, but, we did a bill a couple years ago protecting women's athletics to just say girls and women athletes have a right to compete with integrity and fairness, and you can't have someone swim on the men's team for 3 years and then switch to the women's team and win the national championship. That's wrong. That's not fair. And it's sad that we even have to discuss this, but you've now seen kind of an explosion in doctors with these young kids, minors, giving them puberty blockers, hormone treatment, and doing surgeries, sex change surgeries, of kids that are 15, 16 years old. And so we don't think that's based on medical science. We think that's ideology going into that. And in fact, a lot of countries in Europe have said, no, this is really bad. And it's sad, we've got people in their 20s who went through this when they were minors, and they regret it because these things were irreversible. So in Florida, we have had our Board of Medicine institute rules so that in Florida, if a physician is doing this to minors, they are going to lose their medical license in our state. We're not putting up with it. Now, we are now tackling in Florida higher education, which a lot of people haven't really talked about. I know a lot of people have complained about some of the things that goes on in the universities over the years, but not a lot of Republicans have been willing to do anything about it. And so what we've done is a couple things. One, we now have in Florida all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go if they're not performing well. We also are going to be, I think, the first state in the country to eliminate programs at our universities called DEI. And all DEI, they say it's diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in reality, it's ideology that's being marshaled through the administrative apparatus of the university and imposed on students. DEI as practice is really division, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no place in our public institutions. One of the things we've recognized in Florida, and we take pride in being the free state of Florida, and yes, a lot of it was because people could vacation during COVID, visit, all that, and we had a much different approach in terms of restrictions and all that, and we were proud of that. But if you look at how do you really protect people's freedom, I think you have to understand that the threats to freedom do not just come from government. Of course, they do, but we keep that in check in Florida. They also, the left is trying to impose their agenda through all the different arteries of society. Yes, through the education system, yes, through other bureaucracies, but even through things like corporations and corporate America. So you see these movements for things like, they call it environment, social governance, ESG. Just understand, all that is a Trojan horse to jam leftism through the private sector and impose that on society. And the thing is, they're pursuing policies like attacking energy development, attacking Second Amendment rights, all these things that they would never be able to win at the ballot box. And so they're trying to marshal a lot of economic power on Wall Street and other places, and they're trying to impose this agenda through the back door. We have eliminated ESG in our state pension fund in the state of Florida. We're passing legislation to stop ESG beyond that, and that includes making sure that these big financial institutions aren't discriminating against people because they're gun owners or Christians or conservatives. You have a right to participate in our nation's financial situation. And if people aren't willing to open it up to everybody in Florida, then they're going to be deprived of a pretty lucrative market. So I think we're going to be able to win that one. We're also looking at what the federal government may have in store along these lines. And one of the things I'm concerned about is creating what they call a central bank digital currency. So what they want is they don't like Bitcoin and crypto and all that stuff. And my view is, like, look, if you want to do crypto, do it. It's up to you. I mean, there's no need to get the government involved in that, but they don't want that. They want to basically eliminate all those others. They want to create a digital currency that's controlled by the Federal Reserve. Now, what are they going to do with that digital currency? Well, they are going to use that to control your decision making. They are going to impose ESG criteria on that so that if you're using too much gasoline, you're just not going to be able to make that sale. If you're doing things they don't want, maybe you purchased a firearm they don't want, you're not going to do that. So it's a huge transfer of power from individual Americans and consumers to an unaccountable central bank. And so we're enacting legislation in Florida prohibiting the use of a central bank digital currency in our state. I think all states need to do that. It's a huge mistake. So you need, if you want to have a free state, you have to be able to defend the people against having the pathologies of the left imposed on them through all these different arteries of society. And so we take that head on. We make it very clear that we will fight the woke in government, but we'll also fight the woke in the schools. We'll also fight the woke in the corporations. We're never going to surrender to the woke mob because Florida is where woke goes to die. Now, one of the things that people would tell me during our last campaign is, although they were really happy about the direction that Florida was going, they viewed the rest of the country as in much worse shape, particularly with our federal government and the policies. And I would say most people that voted for me, that thought that the state was going in the direction, the overwhelming majority of them thought our country was going in the wrong direction. And if you look in Washington, D.C., what do you see out there? First of all, our president, Joe Biden, he's weak. He's floundering. He's really being controlled by these leftist elements of the Democratic Party. If you look at our financial problems, we now are $31 trillion in debt. They did trillions and trillions of dollars of fiscal stimulus. The Fed printed trillions and trillions of dollars of money. What do you think is going to happen? Of course you're going to get inflation. They tried to say it was transitory. That didn't work out for them. Then they spent last year hiking rates very quickly, and that's created dislocations in our economy. And then what happens? You have a bank out in Silicon Valley that does business with all these high rollers out there, and they're putting a lot of money in these accounts. They have millions of dollars in some of these uninsured accounts. Very sophisticated people. This bank was not a systemic risk to our economy, but the bank had problems. People started withdrawing their money. It's going to go under. So what did the Fed and Treasury and FDIC do? They bailed it out. And here's my question. If this was a bank in like upstate New York that had similar problems, would they have bailed out that bank? Or would those people have suffered losses? Of course they would suffer losses. So the politically connected and the important people, they get shielded from this. And then average people are really the ones that have to pay the brunt of this bad policy. And, Biden has really been at the lead of all this. And part of the reason we have inflation, he is deliberately trying to undercut our nation's ability to produce our own energy. When in human history do you not want to use your own resources? It's better for consumers, it's better for business, and it's better for our national security to be energy independent. And of course, his dereliction of duty at the border has been an absolute disgrace. To blindly ignore a problem, and not only ignore, to reverse policies in order to open the border, and having millions and millions of people pouring in, having our border towns totally overrun, having the drugs flowing in, having criminal aliens coming in. And what does he do about it? He was asked about the fentanyl overdoses. There was a family that was upset. They had lost a son or a daughter. And he snickered about that and basically said, oh, that happened before I was president. And I'm just thinking to myself, one of the things that's tough to do as governor is, I console parents who've lost children to fentanyl overdoses. I can tell you it's a very difficult thing for them to go through, because the thing with fentanyl is if they lace it in something, some of these kids, and they shouldn't be doing some of the stuff, but honestly, it's a mistake. Some of the stuff you take, they don't know what's in that. And it turns out you have fentanyl, and you could die, almost immediately from that. And so the stakes have been very high because of this, and it's costing a lot of lives, and yet he's been totally indifferent to this as well. The other thing I think they've done that's been really, really damaging is how they've wielded the power of our federal bureaucracy. When President Reagan came on the scene, he said the most terrifying words in the English language were, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And there was a lot of truth to that, but I think what he was talking about was you had a lot of central planning run amok during the Great Society and the war on poverty. A lot of these social programs, like the welfare state that was created, backfired. It ended up miring more people in poverty and created a culture of poverty rather than a leg up. And so he was pointing out the ills of central planning, people in a far distant California. And he was right about that, and we still have problems with that. But I think the difference now is this bureaucracy's really been weaponized against major factions of our country. Think about what they wanted to do with the COVID mandates for the nurses and for the people in the private sector. They said the nurses were heroes in 2020 for being on the front line. Then the next year, they impose a mandate. Florida, we rejected it. We wouldn't participate in it, and we saved a lot of nurses' jobs. But they wanted to do the mandate to say, you don't have a right to work unless you bend the knee and take the shot. And a lot of particularly the women nurses didn't want to do it. They wanted truck drivers and cops and all these people to potentially lose their job based on this personal choice. You look at what they've done by colluding with big tech to censor information. 2020 election, they spiked stories that were true. During COVID, they would censor things that have turned out to be true. Criticism of lockdowns, lab leak, all these other things, and yet you have DHS and FBI in cahoots, and Fauci in cahoots with Facebook and Twitter and all these different things. They didn't want you to have information, and they wanted to control what you thought and how you behaved. And we even got to the point where the FBI was mobilized on school board meetings when parents were going in Virginia because they were concerned about mask mandates or they were concerned about critical race theory. Who would have thought that would have been something that could happen in the United States of America? So we have a problem with this bureaucracy, and it's gotten to the point, quite frankly, because Congress has not asserted its power to rein in the bureaucrats. Use your power of the purse. Legislate in ways that aren't giving the bureaucracy so much power. And yes, you do need, and Biden doesn't want to do this, but you do need somebody in the executive who will be very determined and diligent about rooting out all these political bureaucrats and making sure that the government works for you, not works against you. And so we need to get that done. But how the bureaucracy's operated, what they're doing, corporations, all this, it just shows you one thing. The left in this country, they're playing for keeps. They are going for the whole enchilada. They want to ensconce themselves in power, and they really want to see the conservative part of the country be second-class citizens. What would they have done after 2020 if they had one or two more senators? And what would they do, God forbid, if they're able to have a trifecta after 2024? Well, I think some of the things they'll do, they'll want to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. They'll want to abolish the Electoral College. They'll want to make D.C. a state so they get guaranteed 2 Democratic senators virtually for life. And they want to overrule voter integrity laws all across the country. They want to mandate ballot harvesting, and they want to prohibit voter ID. Now, that agenda is not an agenda that people are sitting around their kitchen table talking about, saying, oh, man, I just wish we could make D.C. a state. No, American families are talking about safety, education, inflation, all these key issues that affect people's everyday lives, but they're going in that direction because it's really about them exerting power over the rest of society. Now, Florida, what we have shown is that if you exhibit bold leadership, if you have a strong agenda, you can beat the left. And we've beat them time and time again. And at the end of the day, there's no substitute for victory. You got to fight and you got to win. Now, in this day and age, when you stand up for what's right, that's not cost-free. They're going to come at you. Lord knows they come after me all the time. But even if you're just a parent that goes to a school board meeting, if you're someone working on a local level, if you're standing up for the right things, just prepare to have some incoming. That's what's going to happen. And so what we do need is you got to have the courage of your convictions, and you got to have a willingness to stand there and fight when it's not easy. And that's really, I think, the lesson of us in Florida. And we really have no other choice. I mean, I think it fell to us in Florida and to other folks in different parts of the country to carry the torch of what the founder of our country called the sacred fire of liberty. This was something that George Washington understood wasn't guaranteed to burn indefinitely. It required citizens to stand up and be willing to fight for it. And it's a fire that burned in Philadelphia in 1776, when you had 56 men pledge their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish a new nation conceived in liberty. It's a fire that burned at a cemetery in Gettysburg when our first Republican president stood there and pledged this nation to a new birth of freedom. It's a fire that burned on the shores of France when a merry band of brothers stormed the beaches of Normandy, defeated Nazism, and helped save the free world. Now we have a responsibility to carry the same torch. I don't think that, President Reagan used to say freedom's only one generation away from extinction. It's not passed along in the bloodstream. And I must confess, for most of my life, when I heard that, I thought that may have been a little bit dramatic. Isn't freedom in our DNA as Americans? This is just something that's on autopilot? Well, I don't think you could have lived through the last 4 or 5 years and believe that somehow freedom is something that will never be extinguished. It's something that we've got to stand up for, and it's something we've got to fight for. And so what we'll do in Florida, and I know you guys are doing it in Nassau County, is stand strong for what's right, hold the line in defense of freedom, and don't ever, ever back down. We're proud of what we've done in Florida. We got more to do. We've only begun to fight. Thank you all very much. God bless. Thank you.